What is up, ladies and gentlemen of YouTube? My name is Oxtane, and today I present to you the Deathknight wing of Naxxramas for Resto Shaman perspective guide slash overview. Now, this video format is going to be a little different. Let me know what you guys think, and I want to try to use this for the rest of the videos. Some people didn't find the overhead views super helpful, wanted more of an overall guide video, so that's what I'm going to give. Again, I don't have VODs from my POV or anything that I can really use from like private servers or anything like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use one of my guildies, our main tank's perspective from the Blizzard PTR, and how they did those fights, and I'll just tell you where the shaman's position, things like that. We'll go over that VOD as a general idea of what the fight looks like mechanically, as well as using the raidplan.io website that I used in my last video. And I hope that this different format gives you guys a better picture of what you guys should prepare for in these fights. So, again, today we are covering the Deathknight wing, and this wing is a big step up from the Spider wing in terms of difficulty. I'd say 2 out of the 3 fights are non-puggable, and without a lot of coordination or planning ahead of time, you're gonna wipe on 2 of these 3 bosses, which is Razuvious and Four Horsemen, which we'll get into in just a minute. So this video, I hope, will help you guys prepare for that. Know what is expected of you guys as healers. Resto Shaman specifically, not as much priest in this video, but hopefully just overall perspective, it's helpful for everybody. So with that being said, let's get into it and start off with Instructor Razuvious. Alrighty guys, let's go ahead and get into Instructor Razuvious. So this fight is actually really fun. It's mostly the responsibility of the priest in this fight, so as shamans, we get a relatively easy job, which I'll go over. And I'm going to do a hybrid in this video. I'm going to use my main tank Zetox's POV on the official Blizzard PTR when they did this testing. So it is from a main tank perspective, so obviously the perspective is going to be different, but it'll help you guys visualize how the fight's going to go based on the information that I present on this website, like the last video I did. So I hope that's a little bit more helpful and a little bit more tangible to understand. I know the last video format was a little weird for some people, so hopefully this is a little bit more helpful for you guys to see it in action. So let's go ahead and get started here. So Instructor Razuvious, so we have the overview of the room here. We have all the different ads here represented by these markers, which I synced up with Zetox's VOD, so it should be easier for you guys to track which is which in the VOD because they have the same markers. So the overview of this fight is basically this boss, Razuvious, hits like a truck. He hits for like 20k damage, I think, unmitigated. So the idea is to get the ads mind controlled by priests and then get the ads to tank the boss. Okay, and they're going to tank the boss right around here. First one that's going to be MC'd is usually the one in this corner right here. And they're going to tank the boss right here. And that's because the boss does a shout, which if you're a mana user, basically hits you for, I think, like 6k or something. It will basically one-shot you. If it doesn't, it will drain all your mana anyway, so, and then almost kill you on top of that. So you want it to be ranged, which is mostly up to the responsibility of the priest tanking it right here, which means us as shamans are placed right here, place our totems like right around here on the stairs is where they can reach the melee. Even back here a little bit might be okay. Didn't really do any testing if you could place them up here on the ledge and if they'd still reach, but I think they get LOS, so I would pretty much just place like Wind Fury, all that right here. When the boss gets pulled, then go back if you don't feel comfortable. Just like go back to here, right? So that's what I would do. And then basically this fight is going to be more of a chain heal fight for you. You can heal the MC'd ads, but what the priests do is they tank the boss with shield wall, which is why the mobs help tank it, because they have more HP, which means they're not going to get one shot, and they have shield wall just like your normal tanks do, except it's like a minute CD, I think. So you rotate the ads basically in an order. Once one MCs, it has a 60-second cooldown before it can be MC'd again. So then the priests go in rotation. They can break on heartbeat. And off the pool, the boss and all the ads are going to go to the priest that MC'd. So pretty much all the off tanks are going to be like right here. And they're going to tank the other ads right here. All the 3 ads that aren't MC'd, they're going to be right here. And then the MC target will taunt the boss and pop shield wall and place him right here. Right, that way the MC priest shouldn't die. You want probably at least, I would say, 2 definitively you need for this fight for the MCs. But I would err on the side of like 3 or 4 priests. I mean, most raids should have that in Classic WoW anyway. But you don't actually need 4 priests, even though there are 4 ads. You can just have 2 priests and they rotate every other one. It's a lot easier that way in terms of coordination, so I would opt for that. So the biggest thing for us on this fight is pretty much just cleave chain heal off of the melee DPS on the boss and these tanks, because they're all going to be basically in the same order. Because the MC'd ad, you do want to keep it alive, but since it's going to have shield wall most of the time that it's tanking the boss, it's not essential. But if shield wall fades, if somebody calls the shield wall is fading, and you know the mob is about to get clapped, then I would start healing the understudy that's MC'd. But other than that, I would mostly just cleave off the melee and the tanks. That's where the majority of the damage is going to be going out on the raid. And from there, as long as the range DPS over here, they range the shout every time it's about to go out. There should be timers on DBM that are actually accurate. There wasn't as many accurate timers on the PTR, but for the live version, it should be accurate. And then if you're feeling a little bit precautious when the shout's about to go out, just dip out of LOS. And that's pretty much it. That's the whole fight, pretty much. It's just the priests have to manage the MCs. You want to try to keep all the ads up, just since it has the 60-second cooldown. So that's why healing the ads is important for this. And you want to keep them up when you notice one of them gets low. That way, you're not down an ad, and then the 60-second rotation on the MCs gets a lot more complicated. Because if the boss ends up hitting your tank, he's basically just going to get one shot, which we'll see in the VOD. So with that, let's go ahead and let's switch over to the VOD. And they're about to pull on Razuvious here. So you see Razuvious walking around by the ads right here, have all the same markers. Now he pulls with his bow. That is an option to pull so they don't all go to the priest right away. And then these get mind soothed in the front. You see Zetox pulling right here. The mob gets MC'd and it tanks the boss. You see that way it's a little less chaotic off the rip. And you can see the priest positions the boss right here. Shamans will be over here. You will see a chain heal coming from this direction. That shaman's actually in the wrong spot, and you can see the chain move as the shaman moves back into position. So again, you can see where all the shamans are positioned right up here by star. And in this one, since it's mostly a pug, the positioning of the ads is a little scuffed, but generally all the ads should be tanked right around the boss, like right down here at the bottom of the stairs. And generally all the tanks are going to be clumped up with the melee DPS, and you can just cleave. And that's pretty much it. This boss dies pretty quickly, and then you see Star goes in, rotates out for Diamond, then pops shield wall, tanks the boss, rinse, repeat. That's pretty much it. So we just stay out of range of the shout. Honestly, if you just stay up here in this area, it's pretty much out of shout forever, as long as the priest doesn't scuff it. Or in this case, like one of the mages pulls aggro, then you would want to dip behind the pillar just in case the shout goes out. Like you see right there, a bunch of people die. So that is definitely something to be cautious of. So that's the general gist of the fight. It's not too terribly difficult, but it can be easy to mess up if the priests don't handle it properly, or if someone pulls threat, like on that fight, right? So you just want to know your positioning, where to place your totems, where to LOS the boss. And from a shaman perspective, it is relatively simple. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to the second boss of the Deathknight wing. Alrighty guys, so the second boss in the Deathknight wing is Gothik the Harvester. Now, 2 of the 3 bosses in Deathknight wing are pretty challenging, some of the more challenging fights in the raid. This is not one of them. So Obviously, the other one is Four Horsemen, which we'll get to, but this one is basically Razor Gore 2.0. It's very simple. It's just a little bit more complicated than Razor Gore, but the general premise is the same. Phase 1 is just add waves. Phase 2 is the boss comes down and you kill him. It's basically the same thing. The ads die very quickly, but it has a little bit of a twist this time. So we can see that there's two different sides of the room here. One is the dead side, one is the live side. So think of it like Strat, kind of, where you have Strat live and Strat dead. It's basically the same concept. Obviously, the dead side has the bones. I mean, that should kind of be a no-brainer, I guess. So how this fight works is that all the melee, like, you know, the warrior DPS, some of the tanks, stuff like that, the rogues, the feral druid, I guess if you have them, and most of the shamans, obviously, because of Wind Fury, hunters even, because they're physical DPS, will go on the dead side, because all those mobs are immune to magic damage. Meanwhile, on the other side, you have all the priest healers will be on this side, you know, the mages, the warlocks, some of the tanks to tank the mobs, and then obviously like one or two of the shaman. It just depends. Like if a shaman's not in melee group or something, like you probably still want a shaman healer over there anyway. But it really just depends on what your raid composition is. So the mobs have a few different mechanics, but none of them are super worth getting into. I mean, most of them are just repeats of other mobs. Like one of them is like Baron Rivendare, basically on the living side. Where it's like a Deathknight that comes out and he has the same aura that, you know, does like the knockback shadow damage that Baron Rivendare does and Strat, like stuff like that. Like it's pretty simple stuff like knockbacks, just stay out of range. Like it's not really worth getting into because I have limited time on this video and I want to spend most of my time on Four Horsemen. So they basically just get deleted, but the ads that you kill on the live side go over to the dead side and spawn ads there. So the only potential issue you run into is you have to slow down on the live side if the dead side can't keep up with what you're sending them. But on the PTR and everything that we've tested as a guild, didn't really have issues with that. So I wouldn't worry about that as much because the dead side is getting the ads that you're killing on the live side, but the dead side has all the warriors that just zug and do the most damage to things. So it shouldn't really be too much of an issue. It's more of a composition problem at that point, but you'll probably know that going into it. So other than that, yeah, you just kill the ads. It's 4.5 minutes long, so it's a set time. And then the boss comes down in the middle, and you can just kill him. You just zug him down, and he dies, and he melts just like the ads. Again, just like Razor Gore, not much to it. Very simple fight. And we can go ahead and look over a little bit of the VOD from Z-Talks here. As you can see, they have their separate groups here. So melee with, you know, some shaman stuff. The gate closes, and they're just going to go ahead and kill stuff on the other side. And you can see who's close in his group. So it's all the rogues, all the warriors, all the hunters, and then some of the shamans in the melee group. And then I think one shaman just on the other side. And then two of the off tanks on the other side as well. So usually I believe it's the main tank on the dead side and then the off tanks on the other side for all the other ads. Because in essence, all the other warrior DPS, like, you know, they can basically tank ads on their own, right? So basically, they kill something on that side. You see the little beams come down, or they're the little spirits. They spawn on the bone piles, and they just kill what you kill. And you can see how fast these die. I mean, these are elites, and they just got absolutely deleted. So with full world buffs and everything else, like it's basically just like Razor Gore, right? Except with the mechanic of one side spawns the other's ads. But I mean, you can see how fast they're killing these, and this is, for all intents and purposes, a pug. You know, some of my guildies, but mostly pugs. And they're just absolutely wiping the floor with the ads, and then the boss will come down after a couple minutes, and you just kill him. Yeah, so there he goes. He comes down, and he starts on the live side, and all the range. I mean, you can just see how fast he's dying. I mean, he's just getting clapped by Ignite and everything, all the dots. He will throw a little bit of shadow bolts over to the other side. And then there you go, at 50%, which was a little bit less just because all the dots, he teleports back over to the other side. He does do a decent amount of damage, but so does Razor Gore, and I mean, you can see how fast he dies once he goes over to the melee side, and he just gets clapped. So that's literally all that's there to the fight. Again, and I mean, this was a one-shot on the PTR with mostly a pug, so I wouldn't have any real issues past this fight. Like, if you got past Razuvious, this fight will be a one-shot for you, no question. Definitely one of the easier fights in the instance, for sure. Alrighty, guys. Four Horsemen. The probably most anticipated fight of Classic WoW. Probably the hardest, mechanically intensive boss of vanilla WoW, for sure. I'd be hard-pressed to find one that's more mechanically intensive than this one. There are a lot of fun and interesting mechanic fights in vanilla WoW, and this is certainly one of them. So starting out, the basic premise of this fight is obviously there are the Four Horsemen. They get tanked in 4 separate corners of the room by a tank at the base, then another tank swaps. So basically, you know, 2 tanks in each corner, yada, yada, yada. So you need like 8 tanks, 12 healers. Obviously, this is a healer guide, so we're going to cover what we need to do as healers, or Resto Shaman specifically, which is pretty much just what every other healer is going to be doing in this fight, which is be divided into groups. This is why I would recommend 12 healers total for 4 different groups of 3. So 3 healers for each horseman. Each horseman gives out a specific mark. The marks do shadow damage. They happen 21 seconds into the fight and then every 13 seconds after that. So they're decently spread out, the stacks, and it's 75-second duration, I believe, on the debuff, but it reapplies when you get a new tick. So the basic premise of this fight is, and I'll provide a visual for this in the editing, that's a little easier to grasp than what I demonstrate on this sheet here, which is basically you're going to have 3 different groups of healers rotate independently of one another. What that means is you're going to have group 1 rotate at a specific time of the healers, then you're going to have group 2 rotated at a different time, and then group 3 at a different time. And that way there's always different healers at each of the bosses, so your stacks don't get too high. So basically, if I can demonstrate this, this is why I used druids as different representation visually, just so it's indicative of 3 different groups. So let's say the shaman is group number 1. All the shamans are group number 1. So okay, here, swap at this marker, and then you swap to this one, swaps to that one, swaps to this one, and then all the shamans have swapped. Then after that, the priests swap, and then you do that. Okay, they're swapped. Then after that, the next group swaps, and you just go like that around in a circle, basically. Keep your stacks from getting too high. Now, obviously, it won't be all priests, all druids, all shamans, right? I mean, it'll just be, you'll assign the groups at the start of the fight. You'll know which group you're in, and your group will call out to rotate. And again, I'll have a visual here on the screen to help you guys understand a little bit that more. So like every 3 marks, I think it is roughly just different marks per group. That way things are just, you know, you don't take too much damage as a healer, and people are constantly rotating in and out. So that's the basic premise. I know it sounds a little confusing. It is even to me without a lot of practice on this fight, since I wasn't able to make the PTR or anything like that. And even the PTR time that my guild did have was so limited that I don't think it would have really eased my worry, I guess, about this fight. So that's the basic premise in a nutshell. But each of the bosses on top of the different marks and you having to rotate in and out also have their own set of mechanics. So depending on what boss you're around, this is where the GSPPs come in handy for the marks, because all the marks do shadow damage. But something like the Greater Fire Protection, there are 2 different bosses that do fire damage, and depending on the other bosses we'll get into here in a minute, all do different mechanics. So let's go ahead and start with Mograine. So Mograine, from our healer perspective is basically just stand there. For the most part, it's just going to hit really hard on your tank for fire damage, so your tank might even equip FR for this. Basically, it's just going to apply like a fire debuff and dot, stuff like that. So from a healer perspective, Mograin's pretty simple. You just kind of stand there and just don't let the tank die. Be prepared to heal him through the fire damage that he's taking. Hopefully he has some FR. If not, he's just going to take a lot more damage, so that's something to be wary of. Thane Korthaz is also a very scary one, where he drops a meteor, and it works just like AQ. So if you're, the mobs from like Twin Imps, the big boys, how they do the meteor and you have to be grouped up, it's basically just like that. So it divides fire damage split amongst every player hit in an 8-yard radius. So you want to be stacked on that boss because the meteors clap. And then the first one occurs at the same time as the first mark. And then I believe the timer after the first one is not a set time. I believe it's anywhere from, I think, 9 to 16 seconds. Most of the time it'll line up with a mark, but if it doesn't exactly, it'll either come slightly before or slightly after. So that's something to keep in mind. So that's Thane Korthaz. Zalik is the white Deathknight with the white horse. And he is basically that boss in ZG where he does the banana beam. It's like the chain heal animation. If you're too close to people, you get blasted, basically, or just like Cthulhu I beam, right? It's the same mechanic, same thing, where it doubles the damage basis on if it bounces off target. So you want to be spread out when you're healing Zalik. And I'm sorry if I'm not pronouncing these properly. So that's the main thing. It's just called Holy Wrath, and it just does the same beam visually as the one in ZG and works just like the I beam and that beam as well. So you just, and it's holy damage, so there's nothing you can really do to like prevent that. It's not like popping a nature protection on Cthulhu or a GSPP or anything like that. Like there's no holy damage absorb, obviously. So you just want to be, it's a 10-yard range, whereas Cthulhu I believe is 11, so it's about the same range there. So just do slash range 10. You should be all set on that fight. And that occurs every 10 to 15 seconds. So not too much on there. And then on top of, again, and you're going to have to keep rotating these every now and then. So you want to obviously know what every boss does, because you're going to go to every boss throughout the fight. And this is going to be one of those fights that's probably going to be really long and requires a lot of consumes the week one. So keep that in mind. And then finally, Lady Blamu. I'm not even, I probably butchered that, but that's that's what I'm going with. So this one is also kind of scary. She does a void zone on the ground. It's just like a black hole that pops up under a random player, and it happens every 10 to 16 seconds, and you want to move out immediately. I think it has like a second or two window, but as soon as you see that go down, you get out of there, because it ticks for like 5k damage per second. So you're gonna get blasted if you stand in that. So but it's a pretty short, I think it's only like a 1-yard radius, so it's a very small area, and it stays up for like a minute and a half. So they're just going to keep piling up over the fight, because they go out every 10 to 15 seconds. So you just don't stand in them, period, no matter what. And if you see it pop up on you, move immediately. Don't finish your heal. Don't do anything like that. Just get away. The other things they'll do is they'll do like shield wall. So they'll just, at I believe it's 50% and 20% HP, they take reduced damage by 75% for 20 seconds. Then when they die, there's like a ghost version of them that spawns, but he just stays. He can't move, so he'll just stay in place wherever the original one died. And it'll continue doing, attacks and building up the marks and everything. And so that's basically what each boss does. And the general rotation of what you need to do. I know it's a little bit confusing, but it becomes significantly easier once more of them die. And then, you just slowly take out one at a time. I think each one has like 600k, so it's not a ton, but with every person rotating and kind of splitting between them, it just takes a while, right? So that's something to be mindful of. So that's like a total of what, like 2.4 million health that you're whittling down. Not a ton, but definitely not a little bit either. Look a little bit at the VOD here of Zetox's. Again, this is a pretty limited thing. I think they wiped pretty early on, and this was like near the end of the testing, but you can see all the bosses here. You can see what each one looks like. So Thane is like the little like the little dwarf that you can see Zetox taken away here. So this is the meteor guy. And I think they were mostly short on healers too. I think that's where this really hurt them. Like, they definitely don't have 12 healers, so that's part of the problem. So obviously you can only see his perspective, so it is a little bit harder to tell. And you can see where Guru is his shaman right here, where he's placing his totems, the general range that you're gonna be. Yeah, putting down Fire Res Totem on Thane and the other boss as well, Mograine, is really important. And you can see the meteor just clapped the other healer. So you pretty much just want to be like in an 8-yard range of the tank, just because of the meteor, right? So, and then Zetox rotates out, other people rotate out. You can see those void circles on the ground over there, everything like that. So that is pretty much it. I know it's not great footage and it's a little scuffed, but without much more understanding of the boss. I mean, you can see Mograine here is like almost already dead in this, right? So they don't take too terribly long to kill. Most of the difficulty of this fight is not in how long it takes to kill them or whatever. We'll go over another fight in Naxx that's kind of like that. But this one is more mechanically heavy, relying on everybody else to do their job right, not taking too many stacks of the marks, handling the mechanics on the bosses respectively. If you can do all that, it's not too terribly difficult. It's just going to require a lot of time and effort to make sure that you get it right. So that is it for the Deathknight wing. I hope this format was a little bit more helpful for you guys. If you'd like to see more or something for me to change, just let me know in the comments. I'm always looking for ways to improve my videos. And I will be back with the other two wings as well as Saf and KT. I'm going to be releasing these videos pretty rapid fire as I'm recording them all in the same night. So appreciate you guys. Love you guys. And I will be back in the next one. Until then, guys, see ya.